Hello everyone, welcome to Karma Education. This channel has a target to cover the whole syllabus of UGC NET education subject paper 2 only. We have completed unit 2 totally and half of unit 1. We also discussed some previous year questions. In this video, we will discuss hypothesis, concept, sources and types of hypothesis. Let's start. Hypothesis is one of the most important part of research work. We should have clear idea about hypothesis. First, we will discuss the concept of hypothesis. Hypothesis is the presumptive statement of a proposition which investigator seeks to prove. Right, but it is different from assumption. What is assumption? In assumptions, basically there is logical insight and their truthfulness can be observed on the basis of obtained data or evidences. In hypothesis, empirical or experimental verification is needed to prove the presumptive statement. For example, you can presume that in moon there is raining. There is no logic behind this presumption, right? Whereas weather forecast is assumption because the information obtained from the satellite we assume weather condition of a particular place. So there is difference between assumption and presumption. In assumption there is behind assumption there is logical insight, whereas in presumption there is no logical insight. Right, in presumption first we draw a statement, after that we find out the truth behind that statement. Okay. Next is the word hypothesis is a Latin word which is derived from a Greek word which means hypothesis, which means proposal or supposition. So hypothesis means a proposal intended to explain certain facts or observations. The word hypothesis can be divided into two parts like hypo and thesis. Hypo means tentative or subject to the verification. Tentative or subject to the verification. And thesis means statement about the solution of a problem. So hypothesis offers a solution of the problem that is to be verified empirically and based on some rationale. These are some examples of hypothesis. First one is there is no relationship between working hour flexibility and job satisfaction. There is two variables. First one is working hour flexibility and another one is job satisfaction. Regarding variable, there is another video. Next one is employees who have flexible working hours will report greater job satisfaction than employees who work fixed hours. Here two variables are, first one is employees who have flexible working hours and another one is employees who work fixed hours. Now these are some definitions of hypothesis. According to Good and Head, a proposition which can be put to test in order to determine its validity is called hypothesis. Whereas Barr and Skates said that hypothesis is a statement which accepted as true in the light of what is known about the concerned phenomenon at the commencement of the study. And Lundberg said a tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested, is called hypothesis. Now the characteristics of hypothesis. Hypothesis is an objective-oriented statement. Another important characteristics of hypothesis that it must be clear, simple and lucid language. It must be in clear, simple and lucid language. It is a conjectural statement, means it is a theoretical statement. About what? About the relation between two or more variables, right? It is of course a tentative generalization. Tentative means which is not certain or fixed. It is a tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. It is a guess. It is an intelligent guess about the solution of a problem. Hypothesis depicts the sample, tools, method and statistics. Means from hypothesis of a research work, we can get a clear idea about sample, tools, method and statistics which are going to be used of that particular research work. And it is verifiable and testable. We can test it and verify hypothesis. We can test and verify hypothesis, right? It is an eye to observe a problem in a scientific manner. Okay, and it is a deductive reasoning. It is not inductive reasoning, it is a deductive reasoning. Next is sources of hypothesis. First one is logical deduction from theory leads to new hypothesis. For example, from similar previous research work, people draw hypotheses for new research work, right? So logical deduction from theory leads to new hypothesis. Next is observation in the day-by-day practices. We always try to make our life more comfortable from yesterday. So based on past experience, people draw hypotheses to do better. Next, findings of research. It is another important source of hypothesis from which we can start tentative statement of research work. Similarity between phenomena. Analogies or similarity between phenomena, one of the most important source of hypothesis. Next is personal experience and cultural pattern influences on thinking process. From personal experience as well as from cultural pattern, we can draw hypothesis or tentative generalization. So these are the sources of hypothesis. The types of hypothesis. There are prominent four hypotheses. First of all, research hypothesis, then directional hypothesis, non-directional hypothesis and null hypothesis. First is research hypothesis. Research hypothesis is often called as alternative hypothesis. A research hypothesis must contain at least one independent and one dependent variable. The number of variables may increase in research hypothesis, right? A research hypothesis is a predictive statement that relates an independent variable to a dependent variable. And the prediction statement is tested by scientific method. This is the main thing of research hypothesis, that the prediction statement is tested by scientific method. The scientific method may include descriptive, explanatory, exploratory, etc. If the prediction or assumed relation between both independent and dependent variable is not tested by scientific method, then it is not to be considered as research hypothesis. So in research hypothesis, assumed statement must be tested by scientific method, right? Now this is an example of research hypothesis. Weekly test increases scoring ability. Here weekly test is independent variable and scoring ability is dependent variable. Next is directional hypothesis. Directional hypothesis predicts the relationship between two variables and firmly explains the relationship either positive or negative. It is more prominent or more specific than non-directional hypothesis. It is also known as cause and effect hypothesis. For example, use of fertilizer increases the growth of plant. There is a positive sense in the statement. So this is an example of directional hypothesis. Next one is non-directional hypothesis. Non-directional hypothesis is also predictive statement which predicts relationship between two variables, but it doesn't confirm the relationship is positive or negative. For example, there is a relationship between use of fertilizer and growth of plant. There is no positive or negative sense in the statement. So this is an example of non-directional hypothesis. The last one is null hypothesis. Null means zero. Negatively stated hypothesis is called null hypothesis. Null hypothesis is just reverse of research hypothesis or alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is a prediction that there is no change or difference between two variables. For example, there is no relation between weekly test and scoring ability. In null hypothesis, there is no relation between weekly test and scoring ability. Here the two variables are weekly test and scoring ability. It is easier to prove something false than to prove it true. That's why null hypothesis is useful in research work. To avoid personal bias of investigator, this hypothesis is used. So this is all about hypothesis. Thank you.